We were shocked at some of the ways that Germans stay active compared to what we were used to in the US, and today I'm going to share some of those major cultural differences. Hey guys, and welcome back to our channel. I am Donnie, and along with my wife Aubrey, we are two Americans currently living in Germany with our baby and sharing all of our experiences living and traveling throughout Europe. One thing nearly every American living in Germany YouTube channel talks about at some point or another is the fact that, generally speaking, Germans tend to be more active and physically fit than Americans. We've covered this before as well, but that is generally speaking and not the truth for every American or German. In both countries, we have seen lots of people being very active, but we have noticed how Americans and Germans get active can be very different between these two countries. And that's exactly what I'm going to talk about today in our video. Germany versus USA are different sorts of athletic sports. When we first moved to Germany, one of our neighbors was the president of a Volksmarsch club, or basically a non-competitive walking club. This club regularly meets at different trails in our area, or France and Luxembourg, where they will all go for really long hikes and walks. Now, at first glance, a walking club doesn't sound like anything unique because people will get together to walk in the US in informal groups, and from time to time, a formalized club may be formed for active walkers. But like an article from fastcompany.com explains, until recently, American social life has revolved around small groups of people brought together by similar social interests. Over the last few decades, sociologists and political scientists have found that American clubs of all stripes, from youth service clubs to bowling leagues, have experienced steep declines in their memberships. In Germany, however, we have been shocked at how integral social clubs known as Vereine are still so important in German society. In Germany, we have found that social clubs are one of the cornerstones for many Germans wanting to stay physically and socially active. From the smallest towns to the largest cities, various active social clubs will exist for a seemingly infinite number of interests, ranging from dancing to horseback riding and from tennis to shooting sports. Of course, one of the most important athletic clubs to any German town is the Fußball club, but we'll touch on that a little bit more later in the video. I will mention that not all social clubs in Germany are for physical activity because some of them are, for example, Elizabethan societies or even social clubs that were huge decades ago in the US, like the Rotary or Lions Club. But I specifically love the idea of social clubs that center on common fitness interests, as it keeps the community engaged with each other and encouraged to stay active together. Again, this isn't to say that this doesn't exist in the US, but it in no way exists on the level as in Germany. And in fact, I would be interested in knowing, are any of you part of a local social club, whether based on physical activity or not? Of course, going hand in hand with being active is also a healthy diet, and today's video sponsor, Athletic Greens, is an awesome way to supplement a healthy diet. Now, if I'm being honest, I played sports my whole life and I never really focused on what I ate because I would burn it off, but nowadays I am not nearly as active as I used to be, so I've been really focusing a lot more on what I put in my body to stay healthy, but I often can get overwhelmed by all the vitamins and minerals and so on that I need to get. AG1 is great because it is a super simple single scoop of powder that you can throw in your shaker, drink first thing in the morning, and you can feel like you're starting your day off on the right foot, as it contains 75 vitamins, minerals, botanicals, live cultures, and other ingredients from real foods to help support a healthy diet. On top of that, what is everybody concerned with these days? Our immune systems. AG1 is an easy way for me to help contribute to normal immune system function, as it contains these ingredients. If you guys use the link in our description, Athletic Greens will give you 5 free travel packs and a year's supply of vitamin D3 plus K2 with your first AG1 subscription order. And you can try AG1 without obligation with their 60-day money-back guarantee. Along with the importance of these clubs in Germany, a huge difference in physical activity between the US and Germany is who organizes sports for children. I know that Germans are well aware of the school sports culture in the US based on what they have seen in Hollywood movies, and I would say that most depictions of high school sports in TV or movies really isn't that far off from reality, but German schools for the most part are completely without organized organize athletics, and instead it is the community clubs, like those that I just talked about, that organizes athletics, which is extremely different for us. So in the US, you wouldn't really notice this difference in systems until typically about the 7th grade, which is around 12 to 13 years old. This is when most schools start to actually have school sports. Before this age, most children that play sports will be part of a community league that is separate from the schools, fairly similarly to Germany. Then once a child reaches 7th grade, they will then transition to playing sports for their schools typically. The experience varies depending on the sport one chooses to play, but often after the school day is over, the school athletics will begin and the students will go to practice with a coach which most often is just a teacher in the school who also fills this role. Actual competitions between schools also varies depending on the sport as to how or when they occur. For example, in the fall, every Friday night there would be an American football game, and typically a majority of the school student body and lots of people from the community goes to watch and support the local teams. It is a really fun environment that creates a lot of camaraderie amongst the students and communities. I personally played tennis, and I think that the unique thing about that experience is that often tennis tournaments amongst the schools would take place on the weekends, but we also would do a lot of tournaments during the school week. This meant that we would have to go to our teachers and tell them there was a specific day the next week that we would be traveling to another town for a tennis tournament and that we would be missing the school day. Those teachers would then have to give us our work for that day early, and we were expected to get it done and turn it in either right before or right after the athletic events. I do want to point out that all of this is outside of physical education courses that students also take in school. Often students that play for the school athletics would be exempt from physical education classes because of their involvement in an athletic, but PE courses are part of most education systems in the US during the academic day. Like I just talked about, if German kids want to participate in sports, the most common way to do so is in community clubs because the schools do not have organized sports. Overall, the idea is that schools are for education and not for athletics, although schools do require their students to attend a physical education class. Therefore, that is why I think that it probably would be a very unusual concept of missing a couple of days a year of school for athletic events. For Germans, I mean, I personally don't know, so maybe you guys can fill me in. Do the community sports clubs ever have a time where they are allowed for players to sign out of school for athletic events? But like I mentioned before, one of the most important sports clubs to a community is the Fußball club. I have to be honest and say that as an outsider, the Fußball system in Germany is quite complicated to me, so it might be helpful if some of you guys can comment on this below, but my understanding is that a community may have one or more clubs that you can join, and they will have different levels of teams from different age groups and varying levels of skills for adults. So you could join a club as a kid and play it all the way through retirement age if you wanted. Also, a unique aspect of Fußball clubs in Germany, as far as I understand, is that technically even the smallest village's team, if they were good enough and could finance it, they could technically rise all the way up through the leagues to the top Bundesliga of professional soccer if they could beat everybody above them. As I mentioned, I've played many sports growing up, but tennis was always my main focus. Therefore, there are actually a couple of tennis-related differences that I have noticed once I moved to Germany. The first big difference for me is very specific to where I am from in the US, but I was surprised to find out that nearly all outdoor tennis courts I have seen and played on in Germany have been clay courts. I was even more surprised to find indoor courts in our area have been carpet courts. Where I am from in Oklahoma, and after playing tennis tournaments in many of the surrounding states, I had never seen or played on any other court other than hard courts made primarily from concrete and acrylic. If you don't play tennis, I can tell you the experience is very different amongst these types of courts, but I have really enjoyed playing on clay because you're able to slide around as you play, and honestly, the best part is the zen-like experience you get when you are done playing and you rake the clay back to a perfect surface. Another big difference I have found is the availability of free courts to play on in Germany, or actually lack of availability. A really common thing you will find around American neighborhoods and parks are free tennis courts for the community. They are not part of any club, organization, or league exclusively, but are built by the community for the community. If anybody ever wants to go and play, they just have to show up and see if the court is available. Leagues will often also utilize these courts as a free place to organize and play, but it is a huge perk that you don't have to pay any fees for. In Germany, however, I personally have never come across a free tennis court, but rather they always seem to be connected to a tennis club. Now, I personally have never paid for a tennis court in Germany, but only because I was playing with friends who were members of the clubs and paid the fees as a member. I do think that a lot of these you don't only have to be a member, and you could pay to reserve a court if you you randomly wanted to play, but I personally haven't done that. And I think in some ways I get it. Tennis does seem kind of like a random sport for a community to pay for and maintain a court, but I also really like having it as a way to encourage the community to get out and get active rather than there being a monetary barrier for them to try this sport. But of course, you still have to pay for a racket and balls, I guess. I once did a video talking about the difference between grilling and barbecuing because these are words that Germans often use interchangeably, but where we're from, they are two completely different things. Well, along those lines, there is another activity in Germany that seems to have completely different meanings between the US and Germany, and that is camping. For many in the US, like Aubrey and her family, if you drive up to a campsite, pitch a tent right next to your car, walk to the campground bathroom to take a shower, and hang out around the campground pool, you are not camping. You are glamping. But that's exactly what camping seems to mean in Germany. Now, I'll be honest and say that's my kind of camping, and going to a pristine German campground with all of the facilities and amenities required for a comfortable vacation sounds great, but for Aubrey, you must hike miles and miles deep into the woods, hunt for the perfect campsite, pitch your tent, and fight the elements as you rough it deep in the wilderness, far away from humanity and creature comforts like toilets. According to BW Online Shop, wild camping is not to be taken literally in Germany because you are not allowed to pitch your tent in any place in the wild in Germany. Camping is only allowed on designated campsites in this country. The campsites are loosely distributed so that you are spared the direct view of the white caravan wall of the neighbor. Camping on official campsites is not quite as adventurous, but at least it is safe and not punishable. To see who made it this far into the video, the random question of the week is shoes or sandals? Which footwear do you prefer? Thanks so much for watching, guys. Be sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons, and we will see you in our next video. Are still so important in German society. Are still so important in German society. Are still so important in German society. Most often is just a teacher in the school which most often is just a teacher in the school who